Imagine someone asks you where Greek philosophy came from. You say Athens, you say Socrates, you say the marble colonnades of the Acropolis, the wine-dark sea, the birthplace of democracy. You'd be right. But you'd also be missing something that was buried so completely, for so long, that even most historians forgot it existed. Because roughly 2,000 years ago, in the mountains of what is now Afghanistan, one of the most war-torn, isolated, fundamentalist places on Earth, there were Greek cities, Greek temples, Greek kings who minted coins with the face of Zeus on one side and the Buddha on the other. That's not a metaphor. That's not mythology. Those coins exist. You can hold them in your hand today. This is the story of the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom, a civilization so strange, so improbable, and so completely erased from popular memory that when archaeologists first uncovered evidence of it in the 20th century, they genuinely weren't sure they were reading the ruins correctly. A place where soldiers who had marched with Alexander the Great looked up at the Hindu Kush Mountains and decided they weren't going home. You may have caught a glimpse of this story somewhere, a short video, a passing reference, but the full story is stranger than any of that. And it starts not with peace, not with philosophy, not with the meeting of East and West. It starts with a man who changed the entire world by refusing to stop walking. To understand how a Greek kingdom ended up in the heart of Central Asia, you have to understand Alexander the Great, not the textbook version, not the marble statue version, but the real version. A young man from Macedonia, barely into his 20s, who looked at the greatest empire the world had ever known and decided it wasn't enough. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed from Europe into Asia with an army of roughly 40,000 men. He was 22 years old. Within a decade, he had conquered Persia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and pushed his armies further east than any Greek force had ever gone. He crossed the Hindu Kush, those same mountains you'd see on a map of modern Afghanistan, not once, but multiple times. He founded cities in what is now Kandahar, Herat, and Balkh. He named most of them Alexandria, because of course he did. His men were exhausted. They had been marching for years. They had wives and children back in Greece they hadn't seen since they were young men. At a river in what is now Pakistan, they finally mutinied. They said, "We'll go no further." Alexander, heartbroken and furious, turned back west. And then, in 323 BC in Babylon, aged just 32, Alexander the Great died. From fever, from drink, possibly from poison. Nobody knows for certain, and that uncertainty has gnawed at historians ever since. His death created an immediate catastrophe, because Alexander had no clear heir. He had no plan. He had built the largest empire in the world, and he had not written down what was supposed to happen next. What followed was called the Wars of the Diadochi, the Wars of the Successors. His generals, men who had fought beside him for decades, turned on each other. They carved up the empire like wolves over a carcass. Ptolemy took Egypt, Seleucus took Persia and the East. And those Greek settlers, soldiers, administrators, merchants, who had been left behind in the far eastern provinces, they were suddenly very, very far from home, and very much on their own. Here's something that rarely gets discussed. When Alexander conquered new territory, he didn't just march through it and leave. He planted people. He took Greek and Macedonian soldiers, many of them veterans, and he settled them in these new cities. He gave them land. He gave them the promise of a new life at the edge of the known world. Some of them had local wives by now, children born in Central Asia who had never seen Greece. A whole generation of people who were Greek by heritage, but Bactrian by birth. Bactria. You'll want to remember that name. It roughly corresponds to modern northern Afghanistan and parts of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. It was a fertile region framed by the Amu Darya River to the north and the Hindu Kush to the south. Rich enough to sustain cities, remote enough that the rest of the world might forget you existed. After Alexander's death, Bactria fell under the control of the Seleucid Empire, the chunk of Alexander's conquests that his general Seleucus had claimed. For decades, the Greek settlers there paid tribute to a Seleucid king who ruled from thousands of miles away. And then, around 250 BC, something happened. A man named Diodotus, the Greek governor of Bactria, looked around at the chaos consuming the wider world. He watched the Seleucid Empire stretch thin, fighting wars on multiple fronts. He watched the power of distant kings diminish with every passing year, and he made a decision. He declared independence. He didn't ask permission, he didn't petition a distant court. He simply stopped paying tribute, started minting his own coins, and announced to the world that Bactria was now a sovereign kingdom. This was not a small act. This was the kind of decision that gets men killed. The kind of decision that requires absolute conviction or absolute desperation. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Nobody came to stop him. The Seleucids were too distracted. And just like that, the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom was born. What those first settlers could not have imagined was that their little rebellious corner of the world would, over the next century, become one of the most extraordinary civilizations in human history. But they were about to find out. Here's what strikes me most about the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. It survived. That sounds simple, but think about where it was. Think about what surrounded it. To the west, the remnants of the Seleucid Empire, which still occasionally wanted it back. To the east, the rising power of India and the Maurya Empire. To the north, the open steppes of Central Asia, which even in the ancient world were a highway for nomadic peoples who had a long tradition of sweeping down and destroying settled civilizations. And yet, the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom not only survived, it expanded. Under a series of competent, often brilliant kings, this Greek civilization in the Hindu Kush became a regional power. They built cities with Greek-style grids, colonnaded streets, temples with classical architecture, gymnasiums where men wrestled and debated philosophy under the shadow of mountains that would have been completely alien to their Greek ancestors. The capital was Bactra, modern Balkh in northern Afghanistan. Ancient sources described it as wealthy, educated, sophisticated. The city of 1,000 golden temples, some called it. Take a moment to picture that. Not the Afghanistan of news footage, not the dust and the rubble and the roadblocks. Picture a Greek city, circa 200 BC. Marble columns catching morning light. Merchants in the marketplace, selling goods that had traveled from China, from India, from the Mediterranean. Scholars in conversation about Plato. And above it all, the permanent white peaks of the Hindu Kush. It's the kind of image that almost feels like it belongs to fantasy. But it was real. And what made it even more remarkable was what it was becoming. Because this was not a Greek colony that kept itself sealed off from the surrounding culture, suspicious of the local population, trying desperately to stay purely Greek. Something much more interesting was happening. This channel exists to preserve stories like this. The chapters that fell out of the history books, the civilizations that were swallowed by time and then forgotten. If this is the kind of story you've been searching for, you know what to do. By the 2nd century BC, the Greco-Bactrian kings had pushed south across the Hindu Kush into what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. The region was called the Punjab. They called themselves the Indo-Greek kings now, and they ruled over a population that was not Greek at all. It was Buddhist. Buddhism, at this point in history, was at the height of its early influence in South Asia. The great emperor Ashoka had spread the Dharma across India only a generation or two before. Buddhist monasteries and stupas dotted the landscape. Ordinary people in the villages and towns that these Greek kings now ruled organized their entire lives around Buddhist philosophy. And here's where the story gets genuinely strange. The Greeks didn't try to suppress it. Some of them converted, not in a political, cynical way, not the way conquerors sometimes adopt local religion to better control a population. Some of these Greek soldiers, merchants, and administrators genuinely engaged with Buddhist thought. They sat with monks. They asked questions. They found, perhaps, that a philosophy built on impermanence and the cessation of suffering spoke to something they recognized from their own Stoic and Epicurean traditions. The cultural exchange went both ways. Buddhist philosophers encountered Greek logic and rhetoric and incorporated them. Greek artists began depicting the Buddha for the first time in human form. Before the Greeks arrived, Buddhist art typically represented the Buddha through symbols, a footprint, an empty throne. It was Greek sculptors who first gave the Buddha a face. That face, incidentally, looks remarkably Greek. The early Gandharan Buddhas, and Gandhara is the name for this fusion culture, have wavy hair, classical facial features, robes that drape like a Greek Himation. They look like Apollo who found enlightenment. This art style spread. It traveled east along trade routes, through Central Asia and into China. The way the Buddha is depicted in East Asian art today, those flowing robes, that serene, idealized face, can be traced back through a long chain to Greek sculptors working in the Punjab 2,000 years ago. Think about that. Every time you see a Buddha statue, you are looking at the ghost of Alexander's empire. But the most extraordinary figure in this story, the one who sits at the very center of the East-West collision, hasn't appeared yet. That comes next. His name was Menander. In the West, he's almost unknown. In Buddhist tradition, he is Milinda, one of the most celebrated kings in the entire history of the faith. There is a text called the Milinda Panha, the Questions of Milinda, that records his theological debates with a Buddhist monk named Nagasena. That text is still read in Buddhist monasteries today. Menander ruled the Indo-Greek kingdom from roughly 165 to 130 BC. He expanded its territory further than any king before him. Ancient Greek sources say he was one of the few Bactrian kings whose fame spread all the way back to the Mediterranean. Plutarch, writing centuries later, mentions him as a truly great ruler. But what made Menander remarkable wasn't his military record. It was his mind. According to the Milinda Panha, Menander summoned the monk Nagasena to his court and posed question after question about Buddhist philosophy. What is the self? Does consciousness survive death? How can someone act without ego? The questions were sharp, probing. The questions of a man trained in Greek dialectic, turning his intellectual tools on an entirely different philosophical tradition. Nagasena gave answers. Menander pushed back. The debate went on for days. At the end of it, according to the text, Menander converted to Buddhism. Now, whether that's historically accurate or pious legend, historians still debate. But here's what we do know. When Menander died, cities across his kingdom reportedly quarreled over the right to keep his ashes, the same way Buddhist cities quarreled over the relics of great monks and teachers. That is not nothing. That is a Greek king being treated at death, like a Buddhist saint. How would you have made sense of that living in Athens, hearing rumors travel back along the trade routes about these strange kings in the Far East, who were somehow both Greek and not Greek at all? The world was bigger and stranger than anyone had imagined, and it was about to get stranger still.